It was another Monday morning, and Ted was sweeping up a mess of streamers and balloons in the school cafeteria. The graduating seniors must have had quite the party last night, celebrating the end of their high school careers. Ted didn't mind the extra work. It kept him busy during his shift as the school janitor. As he piled up the last of the colorful debris, Ted heard the heavy double doors swing open behind him. He turned to greet whoever had entered but froze when he saw the woman standing there, a large hunting knife gripped tightly in her hand. "Nobody! Move!" she screamed, brandishing the knife wildly. The few remaining students in the cafeteria gasped and huddled together against the far wall in terror. Ted instinctively ducked behind the lunch counter, his broom still in hand, peering over the edge cautiously. He took in the scene unfolding before him. The woman was strikingly disheveled, with tangled hair and wild eyes that darted around the room frantically. "I know you're in here," she growled. "I saw your car in the parking lot. I'm not leaving until I find you, you son of a bitch." Ted wondered who this deranged woman could possibly be looking for. His gaze flickered over to the cowering students, taking in their frightened faces. Among them was Todd, a shy freshman boy who often helped Ted tidy up after school. Todd was trembling so violently he looked ready to pass out. Ted knew he had to do something to help distract this woman before she hurt someone. But what? Just then, Principal Walker emerged from his office, having heard the commotion. "Miss, I'm going to have to ask you to put down the knife." "Why don't we go talk to the police instead?" he said in a calm voice, hands raised passively. The woman spun around to face him, eyes blazing. "You're not him!" she yelled. With a primal scream of rage, she lunged forward and plunged the knife into Principal Walker's gut. He let out a gasp of shock and fell to his knees before slumping over on the floor. Panic erupted as students began screaming and scrambling to get away. The woman yanked the knife free and brandished it at the fleeing crowd. "Nobody leave. I'll gut every single one of you if you don't tell me where he is." Ted's mind raced as the gravity of the situation sank in. This woman was now a murderer and had made it clear she wouldn't hesitate to kill again. He had to come up with a plan, and fast, before any of the students were next. Looking around frantically, his eyes landed on the large janitorial closet across the room. An idea started to form. The woman began prowling up and down the rows of tables, pausing every so often to peer under them with a crazed gleam in her eyes. "I know you're all hiding something from me," she hissed. "Tell me where he is, or I'll gut every last one of you." No answers came, just muffled whimpers as the huddled students tried to squeeze themselves into the smallest targets possible. Ted's mind reeled as he watched, still pressed against the back of the closet with Todd trembling at his side. Through a crack in the door, Ted caught glimpses of the woman's unpredictable movements. Each pass brought her closer to their hiding place, and he knew it was only a matter of time before she discovered them. But fleeing was not an option with an armed psychopath on the prowl. He'd have to figure out some way to draw her attention long enough for help to arrive. A glint of light caught Ted's eye, reflecting off the woman's knife as she prowled by again. The blade looked bitingly sharp, and it sent a chill through him as he imagined how easily it could end a life. What demons were raging inside this woman to drive her to such violence? Ted's memories flickered back to his days, serving overseas, to dark scenes he'd spent years trying to forget, the chaos and carnage of the battlefield. Good men cut down in their prime. Even now, he sometimes woke screaming from nightmares about sand and blood. A shuffling sound brought Ted back to the present, as Todd slid further down the wall, his breathing growing ragged. The boy was having a panic attack, on the brink of a breakdown. Ted grabbed his shoulders firmly. "Hey, look at me, kid," he said in a low but steady tone. "Take slow, deep breaths. You're gonna be all right. I promise." Todd nodded shakily and focused on regulating his breathing as instructed. Ted gave him an encouraging smile before turning back to the crack in the door. where the woman had now stopped to mutter angrily to herself. Her nonsensical ramblings hinted at a troubled past, but gave no clues to her real target. A sudden crash from outside made both Todd and Ted jump. The woman whirled around to face the closet, knife raised as if she knew they were there. Ted's hand closed around a folded metal chair leaning nearby, ready to use it as a weapon if needed. But after a tense moment of silence, muffled shouts drifted in from the hallway, followed by the wail of approaching sirens. Reinforcements were here at last, and their luck might finally be turning. But would they arrive in time? And would the woman's unpredictable rage lead her to take a hostage or attack someone else in her desperation to evade capture? Ted steeled himself as best he could, clutching the chair tighter. The next few minutes could mean the difference between life and a horrific death. All they could do now was wait and pray help made it in time to end the nightmare. The sounds of shouting and running feet grew closer outside the closet. Ted held his breath, watching through the crack as the woman paced back and forth in agitation. Her muttering had turned to curses as the police approached, punctuated with wild swings of the knife that had the remaining students flinching back against the wall. Ted's grip tightened on the chair, ready to burst from the closet if needed to draw her attention from the terrified kids. "Don't move! Put down the weapon!" A booming voice echoed from outside, followed by a slam as the cafeteria doors were kicked open. The woman let out an animalistic roar of rage and spun to face the police storming into the room. Back away from the students now, the lead officer had his gun trained on her steadily, flanked by two others with tasers at the ready. For a tense moment, nobody moved. The woman and police at an unstable standoff. Ted held his breath, willing her not to do anything rash that would endanger innocent lives. But her betrayal and madness had driven her past reason. With a feral scream, the woman charged at the officers, knife flashing in a deadly arc. They opened fire instantly, 3 shots piercing her body in brutal succession. Her momentum carried her a few more steps before she crumpled to the ground, crimson pooling beneath her still form. A collective sob of relief escaped the huddled students as the threat was eliminated. Paramedics flooded in to tend to any injuries while police cordoned off the scene. Ted slumped back against the wall, drained both mentally and physically by the harrowing ordeal. It was over. They had survived the slaughter, though the shocking images would no doubt haunt them for years to come. Ted brushed a tear from his cheek, feeling the weight of tragedy keenly once more. So much senseless loss of life. And for what? Revenge born of madness would only breed more darkness. A soft knock sounded from outside the closet, followed by the worried face of Officer Jackson peering in. "You boys okay in here?" he asked gently, taking in their shaken states. Ted nodded, finding his voice. "We're all right now. Thanks to you folks. Get these kids somewhere safe, would you? And call an ambulance, the principal." His voice broke as the crumpled form flashed before his eyes once more. So much death, all to stop one deranged woman's twisted pursuit of a phantom enemy. As the students were let out with comforting arms around their shoulders, Ted gathered Todd close in a protecting hug. "It's over, kid. You're safe now. Let's get you looked at, yeah?" Todd nodded silently, still in shock. As they exited the blood-splattered cafeteria at last, the hidden horrors they had witnessed would stay with Ted for years to come. Scars of the mind were deeper than any flesh wound. But for now, he took solace in the fact that through courage and sacrifice, more innocent lives had been spared from the madness of that terrible day. Ted sat on the bench overlooking the school football field, watching the fading sunlight gild the edges of gathering storm clouds. It had been 5 years since that dreadful day, but the memories still surfaced regularly to torture his dreams. So much had changed in the aftermath. The school was temporarily closed for repairs and counseling, its inhabitants scarred in unseen ways. The board called for increased security and mental health screenings in light of such violence penetrating their once idyllic halls. Police investigations pieced together the tragic backstory of the assailant, a downward spiral ending in homicidal madness. Revenge against a former boyfriend had driven her to insanity and mass murder, destroying innocent lives in the process. Her name was best left unspoken and forgotten, her memory cursed. As for the survivors, each coped in their own way with the trauma. Todd went on to finish high school with the support of friends and family, though his easy smile was forever dimmed. The students who witnessed their principal's brutal stabbing sought counseling for years. Some never fully healed. But Ted's wounds cut the deepest physically and mentally, though hailed a hero for his quick thinking under pressure. Inside, he felt only guilt for failing to save Principal Walker from the attacker's rage. His service overseas had already inflicted wounds, and this fresh horror was the tipping point that sent Ted spiraling into PSD. Nightmares plagued his sleep for months on end, to the point of exhaustion and illness. Loud noises or crowds sent him into panic attacks that stripped away all sense of safety. He lost his job as janitor, unable to function amidst reminders of that terrible day. Therapy and medication provided some relief, but the scars remained deeply embedded in his psyche. For a long time, Ted withdrew from life, haunted by ghosts that mocked his every move. Sleep was a dangerous venture into traumatic memories, while waking brought none of the comforts extinguished by his condition. Existence seemed a bleak, unbearable half-life, mere steps from the abyss. But slowly, with the loving support of his family, Ted began to surface again. He rekindled relationships left neglected during the darkest times. Walks in the countryside replaced the busy social triggers that overwhelmed him. Simple pleasures like gardening and cooking gave structure and calm to every day. It took perseverance, but over the years, the rough edges smoothed from Ted's trauma. Nightmares faded to sporadic incidents, then disappeared altogether. He was able to re-enter crowds and travel once more without distress. Counseling continued to help process repressed emotions and achieve acceptance. So here, Ted found himself on this golden autumn afternoon, free of the shadows that once ruled his existence. He smiled fondly as students laughed in the distance, their joy and lightness of spirit a healing balm. Though ghosts lingered in the corners of his mind, Ted had triumphed over darkness through courage and community. The sunset's brilliant hues reminded him that even in life's deepest trials, beauty could emerge if one simply had faith to see it. Ted's scars would remain, a reminder of survival, but no longer defined his days. All in all, it wasn't a bad place to be after enduring hell. His healing was complete at last, and that was surely worth celebrating.